Go. All right. Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming tonight. Really happy to have you here. Great turnout, 40 people. That's amazing. My name is Rich Shelton. For those of you who I haven't met before, I'm a search manager and a director at Marin County Search and Rescue. And tonight we're going to talk about, and it's kind of a hodgepodge of agenda items, but we're going to talk about various ways to use SARTopo in search management. There'll be some tips and some tricks and some ways to manage, large data searches, particularly in like mutual aid environments. So I've kind of plucked a number of topics out of the air, so it won't entirely flow like a regular class maybe. But what I'm going to talk about tonight initially is map layers, some thoughts about some of the newer map layers that are available in SARTopo, how that relates to the mobile app, and some little tricks to make using the mobile app more effective, I think. Then I'm going to kick into sort of a cursory brush over on mission planning. I'm not going to go into like a full theoretical discussion on it, but I want to kind of talk through some of the things that make mission planning more effective within the SARTopo system. And then the workflow that we typically use now in SARTopo with respect to putting plan sets together and things like that. And then towards the end, I'm going to talk about managing really large incidents and large data sets and the ways you can kind of standardize things to make data easier to manage and sort through and use for planning the next operational period. Any questions on that so far? All right, let's kick it off. I'm going to kick into a PowerPoint here to start with. Let me see if I can turn that on, and I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Let's start off with this. So as I said, I'm not sure on time frame here. If we run out of time, we'll run out of time. But my assumption here going into this is that most of you have used SARTopo, a reasonable amount. I'm not going to talk about the basics at all, but I'm going to talk about kind of the ways we use it in everyday life now and some of the things we've learned over the years about how we can best utilize this. A lot of this came about from some of the other courses we teach. And Matt Jacobs, who's the creator of CalTopo, and I, along with St. John and some others, have been running into each other many, many times over the years, especially at large mutual aid searches, and we work together in overhead a lot. So a lot of the functionality that you see in SARTopo kind of comes out of those experiences we've all had. And I think, as I mentioned earlier before we started recording, a lot of times we would get in situations where one team's speaking French, one's English, one's Spanish, one's German, and it's really hard to kind of get everybody on the same page, especially when you're handing over from one management team to the next. So that kind of led to what we call the extended search management or advanced search management class, which was pretty successful. We ran it quite a few times. Became more difficult, obviously, during the pandemic. But the idea was there, like, how do you integrate technology, including SARTopo, with the operations at a big search? And how do you make that flow kind of seamlessly? And how do you put it in a shape and form that other people can understand when you hand it off? So that eventually led to a negotiated set of what we called best practices. They aren't mandatory, but it was, again, an attempt at having some sort of language that everybody would understand. So I'm going to touch on some of those things tonight. Not everyone has to agree with them, obviously, but I think they've gained some acceptance around the state. We started this several years ago, and some counties have really adopted it and others haven't, which is fine. But it's a place to start anyway. So with that, I'm going to kick off on the map layer side of things. What I want to talk about here really is a little bit about map layer options within SARTopo, including the new satellite options for people that haven't seen those. I'm going to skip over some of these things, but I do want to highlight parcels and structures for those who haven't seen them. They're very useful in fire and recovery and fire evacuation planning situations. I want to talk about the new airplane layer, which we found really handy in rescue environments. And then I'm going to do like an example on map sheets and how you can add map sheets to the system. Map sheets have only been around about, 12 or 18 months. And so some people I've run into have kind of struggled with how to use them and how to create your own map sheets. So I'm going to do a very simple example of one. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about custom layers for people that haven't done those already within the system, and how you can kind of, really enhance your local operation with having custom map layers. And then I'm going to do a quick demo for those who haven't seen this, which it turns out, I'm often surprised a lot of people haven't seen it, the live linking between Google Earth Desktop and SARTopo. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pop over to a screen where I can open a little SARTopo map. And I'm just going to do a quick discussion of a couple of those items here. So let me switch my share, new share. Let's get the right one. All right. Does everyone see just my SARTopo map now? Anyone? Yep. Okay, cool. So this is just a little map of Point Reyes here. So I just wanted to kind of, for people that haven't been super involved, talk about some of the newer things that Matt Jacobs has added, which are really fantastic. And just to back up again, to talk about Matt for a second, Matt used to be a one-man show, and it became overwhelming. It was a part-time job at first, going back to around 2012, I think, when he made the first iterations of SARTopo. So eventually, over the years, he decided it's either I sink my teeth into this and try to make it a career, or I can't do it anymore. I can't split my time. So he really went all in on it. And then in the last 2 or 3 years, he's hired a lot of developers at great expense, but he's added a lot of cool functionality, and he has a longer term business plan for the company. So what that's really meant is that you're seeing a lot of new product here, a lot of new functionality, the creation of the mobile app, all those sorts of things have come out of that effort over the last 2 years or so. So kind of diving in here, I just wanted to talk about a few different map layers that you may not be familiar with so far. And let's start with the live satellite stuff. For those that haven't seen it, you may be familiar with GOES Live. It's nighttime here now, so it's not super interesting. But if you zoom out, this is the GOES West satellite. The new GOES West satellite just launched yesterday, so we'll have slightly enhanced capabilities soon. But I'm going to go ahead and do an overlay so you can see state of California. It's nighttime and it's cloudy, so you're not seeing a lot of stuff. But this is a very useful layer, and it's very useful when you have fire season, for instance. It's also very useful for alpine searches, wintertime. You can see snow lines pretty well. You can see, on a search in a certain county, you can kind of zoom in and figure out whether you're going to be facing a snow and ice situation or not. If I go to what's called the Sentinel here, weekly, you're going to get a high resolution version of that, which is not showing up. That's interesting. So Sentinel is dead for some reason. Okay, normally you'll get a very high resolution. Let me go back to an older one and see if that works. Okay, that's embarrassing. Oh, there we go. Okay, I'm going back a few days, but you get the idea here. It's a higher resolution, and you can see snow cover quite well as you zoom in. And this is updated every 2 or 3 days. It can be very useful for fire too, because you can go in here and you can change it to false color burn during fire season. You'll see a very well delineated fire line and stuff. It's not live, obviously, but it's very high resolution, and it is updated every day or two. So it's a very useful layer, and I recommend people kind of get comfortable using it. Another version of this is GOES Temperature, and that is essentially not a lot at night, but during fire season, again, it's a subtle difference. So what you kind of have when you go into fire layers, let me go back to a basic map here real quick. But when you go into the fire season and you go into fire activity down here, which is another set of new changes, you can choose from various heat signatures. In fact, here's the fire, down in Bishop a couple weeks ago or a week ago. There's not a lot going on right now, but we know it'll be here soon. But you'll see one where it says GOES detections, and this will show you fires starting up, not with a great deal of precision, but it's pretty live. And we've worked at fires where we were pretty much ahead of the fire guys many times in the fire behavior because you could see it live. Another subtle variation that is not really described in the literature anywhere is the one called Goes Heat. And Goes Heat, we found, particularly in the big fires in the Sierra last year, is a more subtle gradation of the fire line. So I can't really show it to you now, but when you're in Goes Heat mode, you can see exactly where the fire is burning with 5-minute updates. And they won't just be big asterisks on the map saying there's a fire burning here. It'll be much more subtle and precise. So it's a really good system when you're in fire season. And I know many of us have been pulled in more and more to the fire side of the search and rescue business, either on pre-fire evacuation type situations or in post-fire recovery operations. I think many of us have been involved a lot more than we want to be in those things. So the satellite stuff is really good. Going along those lines, because there's been so much of a request for things that will help us manage fires, I just wanted to touch on a couple of other things that have kind of come up recently. If I zoom into like our area here in Marin, I can go into a mode where, let me just pull up a more common map like Google Maps here. And you'll see there are some other fairly new layers here. One is called, make sure I'm logged in here. Yep, I can go parcel data, right? So this is really nice, even if you're doing something like a dementia search in an urban area, suburban area. You can go in here and delineate parcels, and you can also turn on structures. And these are AI generated structure layers from Microsoft, which are not showing up for some reason. What is going on? Oh, there they are. Just took a while to kick in. Okay, so these are building footprints, which are just intentionally a little bit subtle in their rendering. You'll see another new layer here, which is very nice, called Map Builder Roads. So this is a layer that Matt put together. We kind of worked on a 2-dimensional road layer, so the roads have some structure to them. So if you're in an area with residents and you're doing a dementia search or whatever, this can give you a very clear picture of where the buildings are, how the streets are laid out, without cluttering things up too much. In addition to site address, you can also, in many areas, pull up the ownership of parcels. So you can kind of go down, and it seems to be a little slow tonight, but you can see who owns various parcels by name in most counties in California. That can be useful at times too. So just another twist on this. Finally, with respect to this sort of thing, and it relates to fire again, one of the things we wonder about or worry about when we're trying to do evacuations and define assignments for evacuations is how many houses and structures are in a particular area. So over here on the left, you'll see what's the familiar measurement tool where you can measure length and areas and so forth. You'll see there are 2 new options down here that have been around just since the end of last fire season, structure count and parcel count. So I can go in here and say measure with the measure tool, hit structure count, and feel free to stop me if I'm not clear or things are not coming across well. So I'm going to go down and just kind of take this area here, draw a polygon around it, click, 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 click. And when I get to the end and double click, it'll say there's 122 parcels in there, and I can look up there's 127 houses or whatever. So I don't know how much you guys have been involved in the evacuation side of things and all, but we have been a lot actually. And we've written a lot of evacuation plans, and we wanted a tool that would let us kind of get that sort of information much more quickly. So that's in there now. And I wanted to make sure that that people were aware of that as well. Any questions on that so far? My idea is just kind of hit some of the things that you might not be familiar with that have been added over the last few months here. So moving right along, on the fire side, I wanted to show one more thing since we're kind of on the fire theme. There's a new set of markers in here, and we worked with a number of counties to kind of develop them. It turns out there are markers for ICS fire service. There are USAR markers. These are all intended for natural disaster recoveries, like the house is still standing, it's fine. Structure is damaged. Structure is failed. Structure is destroyed, so forth. That's all great, except those are all for a recovery operation. There are really no sets of symbols to deal with an evacuation. So we spent some time and we came up with this new set of symbols in here. So if you're working on a pre-evacuation, like if you're in an evacuation warning situation, you're able to go in here and send teams out door to door, and they can document different types of dwellings. For instance, banged on the door, didn't wait for a response. No one answered the door. People are evacuating. They need assistance. They're sheltering in place. There's an animal left behind, not accessible. No residents on the parcel, fire station, things like that. So those are new markers that are in there. And we've actually already used them on a pretty major drill since the end of fire season. It was a pretty effective way to tag individual houses and neighborhoods when you have time to work on an evacuation plan. So in terms of layers, those are kind of the new interesting ones. There's one more overlay here that you may not be familiar with so far. I'm going to turn off some of this noise for now. And that is airplanes. So the airplane layer was added in, I think, December, maybe November. And you'll see there's multiple choices here. So you can say all aircraft, which is okay at some points. If I zoom out, you're going to see all the air traffic coming in and out of Oakland and SFO in this case. But the one you'll most often use is helicopters. So we've used this a lot already. You know, Henry 1 or H-30 or H-32 are coming in to assist us, and we can see them flying in. Let me zoom out and see if I can see one of those guys right now. There's one right there. So I can click on that and I can say record it on the map or show the track. And you can see this isn't one of our normal helicopters, but it's flying around over the bay out there. But it can be pretty useful to see when an incoming rescue helicopter is arriving, where they're staging, and then when they're coming in to do a pickoff or something like that. So likewise in mountain searches, you can see the guard helicopters and such too, in most cases, unless they're really in a radio shadow area or something like that. But in general, this has worked pretty well. And we've used this on quite a few searches and rescue situations already. So I think those are pretty cool. The next thing I wanted to show is, did I lose the map? Is in terms of map sheets. I don't know how much you guys have used map sheets so far, but for those that aren't familiar, base layers are essentially big solid layers that are meant to cover large geographic areas like Google Maps or OpenStreetMap and things like that. The US Forest Service layers, all those are in here. But in some cases, you just want kind of a quick and dirty map that you may have for your regional park or something like that. And that's the idea behind map sheets. So if I zoom in again to Marin County here, you'll see that I have a situation where I can go in and overlay a map sheet on top of my base layer here. So if I click on this, you'll see something kind of odd, because there can be millions of map sheets inside the SARTopo system. Some can be public, some can be private, some can be team-based map sheets. So you obviously don't want to see a list of a million map layers when you're looking at, a small part of Marin County here. I only want to see the ones that are actually displayable in my map view. So as I zoom in more and more, the number of available map sheets is going to be smaller and smaller. So in this case, I can just go in here and say, I want the Tom Harrison Marin map to overlay, and I'll put it at 100%, and I can see my Marin trail maps from Tom Harrison. So that's a pretty handy thing. The beauty of these is, in many cases, you can upload them instantly yourself. In the old days, you had to find a host. We use Amazon Web Services as a host, and it's kind of a convoluted process to upload a map layer and all. Well, now you can upload a map pretty directly, and you can have it render right here in SARTopo. If the map you're starting with is already geo-referenced, then you simply upload it and it just appears. It's amazingly easy. I'm going to do a quick demo on that. If it's not a geo-registered map, like it's a JPEG, map, or a picture of a map, or if it's a PDF map that doesn't have any geo-referencing in it, then you kind of go through this little process. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but you essentially anchor 2 points on the map to 2 points on the base map in SARTopo, and then you kind of iterate till it's lined up nicely, and then you say done. So in this case, I'm going to give you an example of a map where I've just gone to our county server here, and we have like evacuation zone maps, pre-Zone Haven here. So I downloaded one for called, where is it? Which one did I download? I'll find it in a second, but I downloaded one of these guys, and it's already a georeference PDF map. So I'm going to go over to this blank map that I've just saved one little marker on. I'm going to go over to this add button up here, and I'm going to go down and say map sheet, add a map sheet. And I'm going to find the file that I wanted to upload, and it is date modified. Where is it? MTZ Inverness. Okay, so that's a mutual threat zone Inverness map put out by the county. So I'm going to hit open, and then I'm going to hit MTZ Inverness. And this is where I could share this publicly. But in this case, I'm just going to upload it to my personal account, after which I can easily share it to my team account too. So I'm sure most of you guys have team accounts. You can do that pretty easily too. Otherwise, you can share it publicly. So I'm going to hit add. It's going to go uploading for a few seconds. You can see at the top, it says Inverness is saved to this map. I hit OK. And then over here, I'm going to now say, get rid of that. And I'm going to add a base layer called, where is it? I just added it. Let me click on it over here. It's easier. All right, so there it is. I've added it to the map layer. If I zoom in on it, you can see it's all geo-referenced because I'm going to remove the transparency. There's my underlying map. I turn it back up. I can see all my fire zone map stuff. So it literally took 5 seconds to add that map. Just to give you an anecdotal story, we were doing a search down in Monterey one time, and social services, it was like a foster kid situation, and where the kid went missing and where the kid lived was so remote they didn't actually have any maps, so the roads up to the house or anything. But social services had actually sketched out a handwritten map, which they emailed to us, and we uploaded it this way and we rendered it, and then that became essentially the map for the search because that was the best we had. But we were able to do that in just a couple of minutes work. So anyway, map sheets are very handy. We have a whole portfolio of them within our team account here. They're very handy, and they can be quick and dirty and used for one search, or they can become part of your team's portfolio of map layers. They're also very handy in the mobile app as well. Okay. Next thing I wanted to mention briefly is this is something I've noticed a lot of people aren't familiar with. Here's a big search we did in Marin. Went 11 operational periods, I believe, in all. And you can see I have a ton of data, and it didn't follow my best practices because I wasn't necessarily on all the operational periods here. So there's a lot of data here, a lot of labels and things. And if I'm going in to plan my next operational period, I can kind of see what's going on, but I might want to have a different perspective on that, especially in 3D hilly environment. So what you can do here, if you're not familiar, is you can hit the export button here in the upper left, and you say, instead of exporting the data that's on the map, you go up here in the upper right corner and it'll say KML network link for Google Earth. And it's kind of hidden up there, but it's a really handy tool. So I'm going to go here and hit the downloads to my desktop. And then I'm going to double click on that, and I'm going to pop up in a second here. So let me just do one thing here. Then I'm going to share a new page with you in just a second. So I'm going to go new share, and I double click. I have to use the Google desktop app itself, not the web version. Everyone see this now? Anyone?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So this now is a live dynamic link into Google Earth, which is pretty cool and handy in certain situations. So I can now zoom into the area of interest on my search here. I can start to scroll around left and right. I can do a lot of things here and look at how I've attacked this search and the kind of data we've recorded, and have a good feel as to what it looks like kind of in real world, as opposed to the flat rendition that we have in SARTopo. So rather than reinvent the wheel and try to put all this cool Google Earth functionality in SARTopo, turns out it's pretty easy to dynamically link it like this. I found this to be really handy on alpine searches where you're trying to write assignments, or you're looking at coverage in super steep, Sierra type or Mendo type environments. and you can get a really good handle on, what the terrain looks like in a much better way than you get from a typical, contour line or something like that. It's just a very handy tool, and it's easy to do. It doesn't take any extra work. You can also link dynamically your map layers from SARTopo as well, although it slows things down a bit. But anyway, another great tool to have in the toolbox. So I'm going to go ahead and close that down now. And oops, let me do a stop share. Let me go back to my other one now. Turns out I did that the wrong way. Okay, so one more thing I wanted to show on that particular, don't tell me I killed that. Where did my browser go? 1 second. Don't tell me. There it is. Okay, thought I lost all of my my tabs that I had pre-selected for tonight. Okay, so going back to my other layer here, one last fire-related thing I wanted to mention is Zone Haven.
You're not,
Rich,
you're not
we just see
sharing.
your handsome face.
Oh, that's too bad. Sorry. Okay, stand by. Let me reshare again. There we go. Come on. All right, back on a map.
Yep, we're good.
Okay, so the last thing, I'm sure many of your counties are involved in Zone Haven in varying ways. We were sort of dragged into it as well, and it kind of supersedes all of the evacuation planning tools that we had used before. So we did go ahead and render up a Zone Haven layer in here that's put in as an overlay. So if I go in here, you'll find Zone Haven Marin, for example. When that renders up, you will see a bunch. Boy, it's really slow tonight. What is going on? Oh, I have zero transparency. That's why. Okay, so I can go in and get all my evacuation zones in here. They're kind of static at the moment, but at least I can see where they are and where the boundaries are for the Zone Haven system. This has been really handy. Great example is Nevada County, where they're on Zone Haven, yet they run all of their evacuations through LE via SARTopo. So they kind of needed that data in SARTopo. So I used a couple of tools to render this for our county, but you can do it for other counties. The notation I wanted to make is that Matt Jacobs has said by the time fire season kicks in this year, he is planning to have a live feed from Zone Haven such that you'll be able to see live zone situations, whether a zone is in evacuation mode or not, kind of dynamically within SARTopo, and make it a lot more useful for those kinds of environments again. So that's all I think I really wanted to cover on map layers per se. I do want to jump into the mobile app as it pertains to map layers a little bit too, because this is something I kind of stumbled across rather than thought about ahead of time. And it was really after kind of confusing a lot of searchers on searches that we figured out the best way to do this. So with that, I'm going to hop back to the PowerPoint for a bit and talk about that. So here's our map sheet slide. Everyone should be able to see okay. Again, they're super handy. They can be temporary or permanent, but what about CalTopo? So one of the things I learned about CalTopo is, especially after you have 2 or 3 operational periods, you send a bunch of searchers out and they just log into the SARTopo map for the day, and it has tons and tons and tons of data. And that searcher really only wants to see a good, clean map with a good, clean map assignment and maybe a handful of markers like important places like the command post and so forth. And yet, if you kind of do it by default, when they open that app up, they're going to have a random map layer shown, and then they're going to have basically all the tracks from the prior days, confusing them, all the stuff they really don't need to see. So it took us a few searches after the mobile app went into beta to realize that that's not a great way to do it. So what I wanted to kind of mention here is there's a couple of tricks, if you don't know them already, for managing that. The number one trick is using this toggle. So when you save a map in SARTopo and you go to save it, it's the little I button when you save a map name, or the save button. And after it's saved, there's a little, let me go back and just show you actually on the map, just to make sure everyone's on board here. Okay, so we're back to the map now. You'll see once you save a map, it's going to be an I button for information here. Otherwise, you'll see a little floppy disk symbol here saying to save the map. But once it's saved, you pop it up and you have a map name here. And then you have this toggle that says map will always show these layers on load. So if I'm running a search in this area and I want to show the Tom Harrison map, I'm going to go down here because that's the one I like for this particular neighborhood that we're working in. And I want the Zone Haven overlay. Then I'm going to go back into this little I here. I'm going to turn that off, kind of close it. Then I'm going to go in and check it back on again to say that map will always load these layers on load. So now anyone who loads that map up, either on the desktop or on the mobile app, is going to see the map layer that me as the planner intended them to see. They won't see whatever random map layer they have in their mobile app. If they don't have this map layer or access to this map layer because it's too custom or whatever, then they'll see a default map layer. But in most cases, when you're working with your team or whatever, you're going to come up with, as a planner, a good choice of map layers for that search that gives the searchers a good view of the search area, best trail map or whatever. And you want them to see that when they open the map. Similarly, the second part is, if I go back to this other screen now, where are we? There we go. Now I'm back on the PowerPoint. So we've done that. We've selected the map layers, and those can be blends of different layers and overlays and things. It'll just freeze all of that and remember it, which is super handy. And everyone on the mobile app will see that same view that the desktop sees. So if you don't do that, I just kind of put an example here, like someone's going to pop up on the left with some random OpenStreetMap view of the search area. Whereas on the right, as a planner, I really wanted them to see this Tom Harrison map with some 3D relief and some contour lines and stuff. So I'm sending those guys out there and they're like, man, these guys give me a really crappy, map to search from. Whereas on the right, if I just check those boxes, they get the correct set and correct view that I intended them to have. So that's a pretty cool tool. The second part of that is selecting which objects will appear for mobile users and desktop users at the same time. So inside each folder, and I can show you this a little bit later, I don't want to just keep hopping back and forth constantly, but inside each folder of things in your map, you will have this little box when you go into edit. And if you check that box, when you load the map, everything in that folder will show up and be displayed on the map. If you don't check that, which is this case right here, and you hit enter, then every time someone loads that map, you won't display, in this case, operational period 8 tracks. So what I do for our searches, if we're on OP4 of a big search, and we've already got 3 days worth of stuff all over the map that I don't want all my searchers to see out there, I go through the OP3 track folder, OP4 track folder, and I uncheck this box in each case. And then when they load the mobile app, once again, they won't see all that extra clutter of tracks that I don't want them to see. They'll only see today's tracks that are coming in. So again, that's another handy tool. Now, the mobile user who's savvy or wants to change things up can go in and customize their view as they see fit out there. But, at least for the average searcher, they're going to see a view that you want them to see. Does that make sense to everyone? And It's kind of a thing that we had to figure out the hard way after people would come back and say, I couldn't even see where I was supposed to go because there were so many tracks on the map and things like that. So anyway, that's a good thing. So another thing, which I don't know how much you guys have done in terms of setting up your members' SARTopo mobile apps with offline data, but there's a couple things here. We've kind of turned it into an institutional thing here in Marin where we kind of pull everyone aside, maybe at a Monday night meeting and say like, okay, tonight we're going to make sure everyone is synced up with their offline data. So there's a couple aspects to this. Obviously, if you're in areas where you don't have cell service, you're going to want to have good background maps. If you go to mutual aid, one of the things we do within our own email system before we leave on a mutual aid search is we remind everyone to go up to the map area and download the offline Forest Service maps or whatever you might happen to need in that particular area, just to make sure you have good offline mapping in poor cell areas. So in this case, map sheets are super easy. So this is the menu system within the SARTopo mobile app here. Go down where the red arrow is, it says map sheets. If you click on that, you're going to see all the map sheets that are available in the area that you've saved on your account. So all you have to do is go in and click on that little red cloud button, and in a few seconds, it will turn green. And that means you've synchronized that map. So we kind of go through a set of map layers that we want each team member to have. In this case, say Tom Harrison and Zone Haven for Marin. And they click those two buttons and they're downloaded on their phone. It's all super simple. And that's really only applicable for essentially map sheets that you've made for your team account or a particular one for a particular search. So anyway, that can be quite handy. Secondly, downloading offline official SARTopo map layers is a good thing to do. So each time we hold one of these trainings, we make sure everyone on the team has downloaded a full set of offline maps for the county, at least. And as I said earlier, when you go out of county, we make sure people do that. Like we're going to Covelo and Mindo or something. We want to download a couple of squares worth of data there. So the way you do that is on the same menu, you go down to the bottom and you say download layers, you click on that. And then this little map layer is going to pop up, which is in the region that your map is already displaying. And as you go in here, you're going to see that you can toggle various squares on, and those are geographic squares that can then be downloaded. So if I just wanted to do this part of Marin County, I would click on this yellow square, it would turn yellow, and then I would go up and click on this download arrow button right here. And then I'm going to be able to download offline maps. And it looks kind of like this. You'll get a menu that pops up. It'll say which of the layers that are available on the SARTopo server do you want to download. In this case, we kind of recommend Map Builder Topo, Map Builder Overlay, which are both really great topo maps, ScanTopo for the Forest Service, and then you could do global imagery if you needed satellite imagery or whatever. But the nice thing is, as you're going along here, it'll toggle how much your download is. Obviously, it can be a couple hundred or more megabytes, so you want to do this over Wi-Fi at home before you take off on a search. And so moral of the story is have everyone prepared for in-county searches just in case they don't have good cell data. And then when you leave county ahead of time, make sure you kind of point your searchers to download that information. I don't know, I'm kind of interested to hear what people have to say, but we've kind of gone pretty much entirely electronic now in terms of our searches. We write our plans electronically, we produce them electronically, we display them electronically. People search using the SARTopo map electronically and record their track that way. And in the end, a lot of searches, we don't even have any paper anymore, really. It's just all so seamless now. Are other people heading in that direction? Are you still on in-county searches? Are you still pretty paper-based? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so for Alameda, we're heading that way. I mean, obviously we had the Christchurch search last year that we tried to do all digitally. We had another one up in another canyon digitally. So yeah, we're certainly trying to go that way.
Yeah, and it's worked really well. Obviously, we kind of pushed the envelope because we worked with Matt on the first beta, and we ran our first electronic search on the first beta of the mobile app, which was a bit of an adventure, but it worked, And now it's gotten dramatically better. It's pretty solid. It's an amazing thing, and the real time, data coming back to you and seeing where all the searchers are in real time, and seeing Henry 1 helicopter fly in on the map and all that kind of stuff is just. It's light years ahead of where we were not so long ago. So anyway, I did want to spend a little time on the mobile app tonight because those are a couple of tricks. If maybe they're obvious if you've used this for a while, but if you haven't, it's a real productivity enhancer for your searchers to give them a nice clean look on the mobile app by setting both the default map layers and which folders of data you want to display to a searcher. So it's all good stuff. Any questions on any of that? Okie doke. I'm going to jump ahead to the next topic, which is a little bit on mission planning. We do almost a week-long course on planning, the planning P and terrain-based searching and how to do sectoring well and stuff. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the mechanics of some of the mission planning tools within SARTopo and the way we use them here. It's pretty darn good at this point in terms of availability. But this is kind of how we will typically go through a search plan. We're going to prepare a map overview. We're going to select the best map layers for that particular search. We're going to add the last known place and some range rings and the ICP and stuff. Then we're going to start, I'm not going to talk about the whole search management process here, but at some point we're going to start drawing assignments, tactical assignments on here, and we're going to put them on the map. And then we're either going to print maps and things like that at the end or use the mobile app. But how do we do that now? And I think it's worth talking about this for a couple of minutes because we've really completely changed the way we approach this over the last 2 years with the advent of the mobile app. So here in Marin, we do every single search plan remotely now. So the main reason for that is if I'm sitting at home, I have my 32-inch monitor, I have a gigabit internet connection. No one's yelling at me and asking where the tape is or the paper or telling me the printer doesn't work and all the usual things that happen when you get there physically. So when we have a call out, we'll designate someone to be plans chief remotely. They're going to get in touch directly with the reporting party and say law enforcement or whoever called us. And we're going to get a sketch of what we think happened. And because we don't know the whole story and we haven't gone through a Matsoning process or really thought about planning regions and things like that, we're going to do a pretty quick and dirty plan. But what we're going to do is what we lack in knowledge, we're going to make up in lots and lots of plans, which we then kind of filter later as information comes in and as we develop more of a picture of what probably happened to that missing person. So we're kind of doing things in reverse. And it's worked really well because we whittle down our assignments to the core ones that are valuable as we learn more information. There's only been one case where this failed, and that's where we wrote this dementia search in San Rafael. We had this guy, he's 85 years old, very immobile. So he'd gone missing before, and we did a bunch of searching. And when our guys finally arrived on scene, they told him, oh, he left on a bike. Didn't anyone tell you that? So all of a sudden now he's miles away on a bike. So our plan was not very good in that case. But in every other search since then, this has gotten us a huge jump start. So for instance, the call comes in, it takes around 30 to 45 minutes for our team to get dispatched to the command post. By the time our team arrives on scene, they have a full plan written remotely and they can access it. And using the mobile app or printing locally or whatever they want to do, they can send teams out as soon as people are on scene. So how do we do that remotely? And I'm not saying this is the only way to do it, but this is how we've kind of done it. So the plans chief will usually open a conference call line or a Zoom line. We actually use Zello for those who are familiar with it. Those who aren't, it's a super good walkie-talkie app for your phone. So it cuts down on unneeded conversation, if you will. And it gives you effectively a radio in your hand that allows you to talk to other planners on a planning channel. And by the way, that's free for first responders. It's a very expensive product for large corporations, but it's free for nonprofit first responders. So we have a big team account. We'll usually use that to kind of talk remotely on. And so what I'll do, let's say I'm the planning chief, I'm going to kind of assign people work, either geographically or by resource or by type, right? So if we're doing a search, say on Mount Tamalpais, I might say, okay, planner one, I want you to do the ground hasty search assignments. Planner two, who's our canine person, I want you to knock out a bunch of trailing dog assignments and area dog assignments, coordinating with the ground person. Next person writes a bunch of e-bike assignments because that's one of the first things we put out usually. Next person might work on logistics and things. That's one way to do it. Another time, we might just draw a big grid on there and say, you do the Northwest, you do the Northeast, and you cover all the assignment types. So it just depends on the geography of what we're doing and the type of person that went missing. But we essentially break up the work and then get everybody banging out assignments. So, and oftentimes we'll have 40, 50, 60 assignments written by the time the teams are really on scene. So at that point, I will have a liaison. So I'm going to talk to essentially an ops person there, and that's my eyes and ears. And I'm going to say, hey, we've written 50 assignments. What do you guys know that we didn't know a half an hour ago? And they'll update us, and we'll say like, okay, well, here's what we're thinking. What do you guys think? And we'll have a little conversation and discussion. And then we'll say, okay, based on that, we're going to prioritize these 5 or 10 assignments first. And then as those assignments go out, that operations person on scene will update the map with which team number went into which assignment. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a couple of minutes. Does that kind of make sense to people? So what we do in terms of mechanics then is once the assignments are roughed out, then we'll try to add more complete detailed descriptions. We'll set the team sizes within SARTopo. Are they 2, 4, 6 person teams? What we think are the importance of those assignments. And that doesn't show up on the assignment sheets for the searchers, but it's really a management tool to say like, hey, these high priority ones we want to get out first, the mediums next, and so forth. Think through the deployment situation. Do we have unusual transportation issues we have to deal with? And then at the very end, we'll use bulk operations to label all those things. And what I want to kind of do is kind of show how that would happen here. I'm going to jump back over to the map for a second. And I want to, let's see, new share. Come on. There we go. Back to the map. And I'm going to come over and say, let's pretend that this was our call out, and this was a real search we had a few years back for a missing despondent. We found their car parked where the ICP symbol was there, and he was definitely despondent. And we headed up into the hills, and we found his car like 2 weeks after he went missing. So we were pretty sure he was up there somewhere. So let me turn that off. So in effect, we have this plan that was put together in a remote style. And this is where we go in and start the labeling process. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with this, but we basically tell everyone, don't bother putting assignment labels, letters, or numbers on here. We'll do that later at the end. So right now I've got a bunch of assignments that my remote team wrote. I'm going to go in at the bottom of that assignments category. I did ask them to put them into different categories. So I actually did something, which is another little trick of the trade sometimes. If we have a lot of canines coming in, I might make OP2 ground operational period and an OP2 canine. Even though I can tag them individually, it makes it a little easier to turn those on and off and see, where the canines are going and so forth versus the ground assignments. So anyway, in this case, we did that. We wrote some descriptions of each assignment. I go down to bulk operations now. I can go in here and I can highlight all of these assignments we just wrote. I go down and scroll down, and I can go re-letter, and just go with me on the assignment lettering for now, because I want to talk about that again in a few minutes. But I hit re-letter here, and I'm going to start at, I'm going to call segment AA for the first one. I hit OK, and instantly everything is lettered. And that's one of the reasons I wait till the end, is because if you have multiple people writing plans and they're looking at the list and they're saying, oh, I see AC, so I must be AD. Then another person puts AD in at the same time. Now you have 2 ADs and you have a big confused mess. So it's really better just to wait till the end to do your assignment lettering and numbering. In this case, I've now lettered my assignments and I'm kind of good to go. I can also go in with bulk operations for those aren't super comfortable with that or haven't used it a lot. And I can go in and I can change all sorts of other things in bulk. If I go down here and say change attributes, I can go in here and I can basically say, I want to use primary frequency of Mira1 in Marin, Mirasar1, let's say, and that will populate every assignment with a primary of Mirasar1. So I can do all the bulk stuff at the end. And now I kind of have my assignment written the way I want it. At that point, we've got, transportation, we've got good assignments written in there, and we're kind of good to go. So now I want to go back and talk a little bit about how we put those assignments in, and just a few tips and things to think about when you're putting assignments in. And we actually spent a couple of days on this topic in our bigger classes in terms of terrain-based search management, which is very powerful. How to really segment regionally, how to do quick finger Matsons and things like that. We just don't really have time for a lot of that tonight, but I do want to talk a little bit about some thoughtful segment design tips within SARTopo. So let me switch back here to my PowerPoint again and talk about a couple of examples here. Everyone see that okay? So here's an example where a Jeep was found at the top of a OHV road here in the Sierras. And you have these two big kind of drainages going down into the river. And, you know, normal segments would be, say, find some geographical boundaries that are easy to follow if you're a searcher and you draw them in like that. And we've all been to searches where you receive an assignment like that and you're like, okay, I'll go out there, but man, that looks interesting anyway. Is that well thought out? I mean, you might have fallen off the cliff and so forth. Is that a good plan? So one of the things I always like to do in SARTopo is really look at the geography carefully. And this again might be where you use your Google link again. There's the assignments. I'm like, oh man, that doesn't look so good. I don't want anybody going up there. You can't get down. It's way too steep and so forth. So how do we look at that? And that's where you bring in something like the slope angle shading tool, which I use on every single high angle search that we go on. It's this primary tool. You can toggle it on and off. One of the other things I didn't mention, if you don't notice it yet, but in the newer versions of SARTopo, there are letter codes in there now next to each one of these layers, and you can toggle them on and off. Like S is slope angle shading, so I can just hit S to turn it on and off when I want to look at it, for instance. So in this case, I've drawn these assignments. I'm like, oh man, look how steep that is. Purple is death zone. Purple's death zone. Red's kind of, you'll probably die without a rope zone. I can't send anybody out there. That's a terrible choice of assignment segmentation. So how do I fix that and make it more logical? So I kind of look at my slopes here, for instance, and I'm like, well, at the top, I've got a fairly flat plateau where the guy could have gone off. I can look for fall marks and disturbed ground safely from a distance. I can do this without hurting anyone. Down below, I can probably send people to search with binoculars and search the scree field at the bottom of the cliffs and try to look up throughout. And I'd probably send a helicopter in here, obviously, because that's the safest way to kind of search that steep terrain. And when you look at it this way, it looks a lot more reasonable. I've got a team up top, they can drive there. I got a team that can come down this river and kind of search this plateaued area. And there's a reasonable chance that you'll figure out what happened to this guy in one of those two ways, and you're never going to be able to do it that other way. So, you know, that's just one example of how to kind of think through the segment problem, because it's just so easy to start drawing segments without really thinking them through. And sometimes those normal rules of geographical breaks and things don't really make sense, and you have to adjust them for the terrain. So on alpine searches, I'm super careful. I'll draw really small segments that say, I want you to go right up this drainage. I don't want you out near these cliffs. I want you in the safe. It looks like there's a safe way through here. If it's safe, go ahead and search it. If it's not, don't do it. That kind of stuff. So you have to really kind of read the land there. Another example that we run into a lot, and I'm guilty of this all the time. You know, we're frantically writing assignments, and here you go. You got this was a dementia search, just a missing person that lived on a little ranch. So here's the guy's property, and it says search area CA on map. And there's an open street view map, and it looks like no previous searching's been done. Here's my 104 form. Little asterisk means I want 4 searchers there. And here's where it's really important to remember, like, I might have written this assignment last night, and it's now 8 o'clock in the morning. I'm sending a team out. It's a different person briefing that team. They're looking at this and they're like, I don't know what this is. They want you to go search this area, go search the area. Well, okay, you can do that, but it's really not a good way to do things. You can see it's an 8-acre search. It's pretty tiny. What are they really trying to achieve here? So that's why I'm a big fan of trying to get some quality text in every assignment. When you have the time, definitely take the time to get something that stands on its own in terms of description in here. And so if I were to redo this one a little bit, I might go like this. I would use a nice satellite imagery. I would say, I do want 4 searchers. It's a type 3 ground assignment. It's flat as a pancake. And I want you to grid search area CA, bordered by Sir Francis Drake on the south and enclosed by barbed wire fences on the other side. Spacing is critical. Search for anything that looks out of place. Clues may be as small as keys. You have permission to search the outbuildings. Deputy hasty searched it last night. So now if I'm like the briefer guy that showed up in the morning and I didn't write this plan, I can look at this and it makes a lot of sense to me. I should be able to answer any questions the searchers might have. And it's a much more complete thing. So it might take a couple more minutes, but you're tying up someone's time for several hours, 4 or 5 people. You want to make the best use of that searcher resource you have. You don't want people wasting their time or not knowing while they're out there, why they are out there. So the better you can do on that, it really pays dividends, I think, in terms of the effectiveness of your search. A lot of this stuff kind of obvious, but it's also stuff that we're not really great at sometimes. And so, and I'm the first to admit it, like when we're banging it out, you're like, well, you know what to do, get out there. But especially when you're planning a next operational period and you have a little bit of breathing room to get it right, it's definitely worth the extra time to really describe the assignment. Any questions, comments so far? Just kind of doing a little greatest hits sort of thing here. Okay, sizing and typing, another thing we spend many hours on typically, but I do like to, when I have the time, differentiate between ground 1, ground 2, ground 3 in SARTopo. Those are all resource types that you can choose. That's super useful, especially if you're writing the plan at night, like that first one where I had that steep cliff. That's a type 1 assignment probably. I don't want people that aren't rope savvy and stuff near those dangerous areas. So I would probably call that a ground 1 team. And that way in the morning, when the briefer comes in, they know that we were serious about thinking about that assignment and we want someone who's really qualified up there in that area. Most of our area search teams are typically, 2 to 6 people. You can think about drainage teams, 3 to 5, usually an odd number with someone in the middle. Neighborhood search teams, if we're doing a dementia search, a driver, maybe a spotter at the curb for safety. Do you need law enforcement with you? Your search teams maybe 2 to 5 people. And as you all know, like typically 1 handler, 1 flanker on those. So, we kind of use those basic rules of thumb to start from in some area searches where it's relatively, safe and open and we have big fields to cover. We might make our teams bigger. If it's really gnarly technical terrain, we probably keep them smaller. But as a rule of thumb, I like to keep teams kind of as small as you can because that enhances your flexibility. If you have a bunch of 8-person teams out there, it's like very large chess pieces. You can't do that many things with them. If you have 4 8-person teams, you can't do a lot of switching around. But if you have 8 4-person teams, you have a lot of flexibility in how you redeploy those teams out there. So I like to try to keep teams kind of on the smaller size. So another thing we like to do is on the bulk operations, I kind of showed you that already. I know I'm jumping around a little bit here, but one of the things I always do, and I'll go back to that same search I was on a second ago and bring up the map. But so in this case, I'm going to go down to the bottom of my assignments. I'm going to go bulk operations. And in here, you have a convenient thing where it shows size here. So for all of my area segments, I can go down and just eyeball them, 15, 20, 22, 12. These were supposed to be quick, very precise, man down, deceased person searches, right? So in some big open areas, I went up to 50 to 60 acres maybe. And I don't like to go much over about 80 acres, say in alpine environments for teams, if they're out for a long period of time. In this case, we were close to command post. We could redeploy a lot. So we kind of put most of them close in where we thought he was into smaller bite-sized pieces that we really wanted to cover. And as we went further out, we kind of did some bigger segments in the lower probability areas that we would get to later and the lower technical difficulty areas. But again, I can go through here. I can see the team sizes that I've spec'd and the area and the size of the assignments that I've spec'd and the priorities. I can always adjust I can click on the priority column here. Are these really the ones that I think are the highest priorities and so forth? So the bulk operations tool, again, is the planner's friend and really lets you kind of work the system a little bit and make sure that your plan has good integrity there. So I want to move back again to the other one. So again, I've checked area, the length, the terrain, the slope, available time. I'm thinking about how I want all that to work out there. So fine tuning the plan, as I mentioned already, typing the 1, 2, and 3 ground searches is really important. Canine types, trailing, HRD, plain old area dogs, so forth. Set the team sizes, priorities, and then you get to the 104 summary for deployment and bulk operations. So that same bulk operations page I was on, there's an option called 104 summary for deployment. Let me just go back and show that for people that aren't familiar with it. And I'm going to new share again. Okay, so now I'm back on this map and I'm gonna go down to bulk operations. I'm gonna highlight all of my assignments for this operational period. I'm gonna go down to the bottom and you can see there's a 104 summary for deployment. I'm gonna click on this right here. And it's gonna give me a table, which I can actually print. It looks a little cleaner when I put it in print mode. But essentially what it does, if you took the time to populate the team sizes on all of your assignments, it actually will go in here and total up your high priority assignments. In this case, I need 5 dog people. I need 4 type 2 ground searchers, and I need, and I need, I don't know why it says 12 there, but I need this many ground type 3 searchers. And then on low priorities, I've got some other totals coming in here too. So anyway, this is a nice way. If I'm ordering resources for the next operational period, I use this tool a lot because I can quickly total up how many people I need for the next day based on my plan, and I can adjust it as needed. So I really recommend that people get used to using that tool when they can, because it does save you a lot of time and lets you keep track of your resource needs really well. Okay, back to this. So now we've kind of got our assignments written. Another thing we moved away from, in the old 104 days, you would print a map for an assignment and you'd print a 104 sheet for an assignment, you'd staple it together, and the team leader would come in and you say, here's your assignment and here's your single map. This is something I'm going to spend a little time on now, and it's been standard for us for about 5 years now, and we've used it a lot in mutual aid environments, and it does, some people get a lot of pushback initially. And in fact, I was one of the ones who pushed back on this initially, and I'm a wholehearted believer in it now. And I kind of want to talk about it a little bit. Part of the big problem in putting a big search together in the old system is you got to print out a bunch of different maps. You got to match them up with the printed out assignments, or you handwrite them out. I'm going to talk about that in a second too. Then you got to staple it together and you got all this paper and stuff. Our view was, how about just a single IAP that has a good set of map packs in it that covers all the assignments well enough to be used for searching? And so everyone has the same map pack. I can print 20 sets of it and I can hand it out to all the team leaders and they all look the same. That's pretty nice. It's also nice if I want to redeploy that team because they already have all the maps they need. And especially if they're using either Avenza or the SARTopo mobile app along with it, then the paper maps are just kind of a crutch for them, and they're handy to have and refer to when you need a bigger view. But they're sort of a secondary use in that case. So what that really means is that our packaging looks a lot different than it used to. And I want to talk about that now. So, in the old days, I would back up my, I always back up my SARTopo map regularly by exporting a JSON backup. I print my assignment map packs, briefing map, 104s for the command post. We're using what I call the 104 summary. I'm going to show you in a second how we've definitely pushed that agenda with some success. We'll package that all up, sometimes just into an IAP all by itself. And then we will prioritize assignments and all. So up until I'd say 2017 or so, that was religiously how we did it, with long form 104 forms and so forth. We don't do it that way at all anymore. It's all very compressed, all into a single document now. And so I want to talk about the old way versus the new way. And I've kind of been pushing this for a long time now. But on the right here, you see the classic 104 NCR form. Historically, these were handwritten. They didn't come out of SARTopo, but you would write your assignment down and you would attach a map that maybe came out of SARTopo. But now we write our assignments in SARTopo. So how do you deal with that? Well, the first iteration, I'd say like 2015, 2016, 2017, was we would print, as you can see this particular example, you would print the long form 104 forms directly out of SARTopo, and that works pretty well. The problem is we like to have these carbon copy forms so we can write the team's names down, and it goes through all 4 copies. And I can hand 1 copy to comms and 1 to ops and 1 to plans and 1 to the team leader. So that's the way we've done it since the early 90s, I think. And that worked okay. The problem is, how do you print this form 4 times and not screw it up? So the clever teams out there, including Nevada County, put a whole comms trailer together just with 1 dedicated printer to print these 4-part forms out. So what you would do is you would print each assignment 4 times in a row, and then you would staple it together, and then you have your carbon copy form, and it would be printed on each color copy. So that works as long as you don't misfeed a single sheet of paper, or as long as someone else doesn't send a print job in the middle or whatever. It's very delicate and easy to break. But we did that for a while, and it kind of worked, but it really mimicked the old way of doing it, except we're taking those forms out of SARTopo instead of writing them by hand now. So that did save us some work, but it's still kind of clunky. The other way you could do it is you could print 4 white copies or photocopy them, or you could write the names on 1 copy and photocopy it 3 times to give to the different people. We did that for a while too. That was clunky. So the whole packaging process in the evenings when you're writing a long search plan was very cumbersome. What I would do back in these days, I would write the next OP at home where I knew I had my own printer and no one messed with it. I had this special 4-part paper at home, and I would just count every sheet going through and make sure I had no paper jams that would throw it all out of sync. And then I would get all my packages together. It was very clunky. So Matt Jacobs and I spent a lot of time talking about this, and we basically jettisoned this whole thing around the end of 2017, I'd say. So here's the new way, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with it, but some of you are probably not. So here's the idea. We wanted to make sure that all the information that's on this form, which is what's the incident, operational period, assignment numbers, who's the team members going out, what's the assignment, how big is it, PODs, what radio channels are we using, am I self-transporting? All that information is on this form on the left. However, it's there for every single assignment we've written. So you notice on the left, I probably have 3 pages there. I think it's the same assignment we were just talking about as an example. And I've got 3 sheets of paper that has 30 something assignments on it now. And it has all the same information. It just doesn't look the same, right? So to accompany that, I now have a pre-printed form that I get from a vendor that's a 4-part form. And all I have to do is write the team number or segment assignment in here and the names, and hand them this sheet of 3 pages that has all the assignments written on it and a little tiny scale map. And then I hand them a standardized map pack. So every single team gets the exact same information. So my printing and packaging is super simple. I can use a regular printer. I don't need to use a fancy special printer. I write on my 4-part forms by hand, but I only write names and assignment, label. That's simple. And in fact, 9 out of 10 times now, all this information just goes in the IAP, not the 4-part form, but the map pack and the 104 summaries on the left here. And so that all goes in there and I'm good to go. So what does that do for me? It's a lot less paper. It's a lot easier to package, but there's a lot of situational awareness advantages to this approach. Number one, field redeployment is super easy. If I got someone 5 miles out and they just finished assignment AA, I tell them, hey, I want you to go to assignment AC now. And instead of having to come back to the command post and ask for new maps or ask for new instructions, they've already got the whole package of information. Another thing that's handy is they'll often see on here or through the mobile app, who's on the next assignment, who's in the canyon next to them. You're doing voice calls, you hear someone down there, you can get on the radio and say, hey, team 203, are you down in that canyon? I see you're in that assignment. So there's, a lot more situational awareness in the field, and you have all the same information, and it's way easier to package up. I've got these 4-part brief forms on the right that I just have a big box of, and I just have to write names on them basically. So that's all a lot easier. So now the second part of this is how do we label our assignments? In this case, you see team numbers, team 201, 202, 203. That seems pretty logical. That's how Marin did it for decades. And then I would butt heads on every search. And we still, many do still in different places. Everybody has a different convention for naming teams or segments or assignments. And there's all kinds of different terminology. So Matt and I clashed constantly at searches because I like to do it this way because it's what I was comfortable with. Matt liked to do it a completely opposite way. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. So what is the debate? So I would say Rich likes assignment numbers. Assignment 101, it's easy to match to a team number. Team 101 is searching segment 101. So how much easier does it get than that? I know it's operational period 101 because the 1 is the operational period and the 01 is team 1. That's super easy. And it's really nice in many Marines, most Marin searches where reassignment at the command post is easy. Team 101 comes in, gets debriefed, eats a sandwich, gets a drink, and now I'm going to send them out as team number 110. And I'll write a new 104 form up, call them team 110 now, and send them back out. And that's how we always did things. That worked pretty well. Matt would say, like, I live up in the mountains and I don't like to do things that way. I like my assignments to be alpha labeled. Assignment AA, for instance. They're independent of the team number. A team can search multiple segments, AA, AB, AC. Team 101 can search multiple alpha segments. And not only that, you can keep those same alpha segments for the duration of the search. And I'm like, well, why do you do that, Matt? Because now you got to track two things, not just the team number, but you got to figure out which team is searching which segment. That seems kind of confusing. And I fought him for months on that. And then I completely did a 180. And our team and many teams have now switched to this kind of convention. And let me kind of explain why that happened, I think. What happened was Matt was used to an environment where there's a lot of remote deployments, helicopter deployments, snowcat deployments, things like that, where people are going way out in the field and they're often covering 2 or 3 or 4 assignments in a day. So Matt didn't want a situation where team 101, you're now team 102. Just remember that. And I want you to go search 102 now, but remember you're 102 instead of 101. And so he's like, that's stupid. You should have assignments that say segment AA, segment AB, segment AC, and team 101, you call them up and say, when you're done with segment AA, I want team 101 to move over to segment AC. And that's all clear. There's no confusion as long as you track that information. So it is, as I say here, a bit trickier tracking the teams in the field, but it works great. It's very, very clean, it's clear, and it's powerful. So what we do now is we write each assignment written with an alpha designator. We retain those for the search duration most of the time. Sometimes we get rid of them and just keep going, but most of the time we'll keep them for the search duration. And then we update SARTopo assignments with team numbers as needed. And we use bulk operations for rapid lettering or numbering of assignments. So let me kind of show you how that works in practice if you're not doing it that way already. So that example I just gave you on the SARTopo map kind of looks like this, where I drew a bunch of assignments, then I used the auto lettering thing to auto assign labels to each assignment that I wrote, each segment assignment. So here we have, AA, AB, AC, AD. That could go in the IAP just as is, very clean. I can have maps that show just like this, AU, AV, AB, AC. There's no team numbers mentioned here. So I can actually produce everything the night ahead. I don't even have to assign team numbers at that point. But I could go in here and say, like, I know I'm going to have at least 5 teams in the morning, and my first 5 priority assignments are AA, B, A, C, A, D. So I could say I want 101 in AA, 102 in AB, 103 in AC. I could add that information ahead of time, but I don't even bother most of the time now. So how does this work in practice? So here I am, I'm the operations chief now in the morning, or the deputy. I got my little clipboard out, plans assignment list, and I've got these nice packages of maps and assignments written out, and I have to start deploying teams. So here we are, operational period 1. I'm going to say 101, I want you to go search AA first. 102, I want you to search AB, 103, AC, 104, AD. And someone there, either me or my deputy, is going to take this information and make sure it immediately gets into SARTopo. So here's the trick. So if operation, as you're deploying teams in the field, you can see in the upper left, there's a field in SARTopo for the letter and for the number. So as those teams are going out, you're updating SARTopo, and you can see on the map, oh, segment AU is now being searched by team 121 right here, and so forth. Segment AA has been assigned to team 101. That's all in there. So now team 101 finishes searching segment AA, and they're 5 miles from the command post, and they radio in, we're done with assignment. So then we say, team 101, we want you to go search segment AK. And then when you're done with that, there should be enough time to search segment AL. So as operations, I'm going to say 101 is assigned to AK, 101 is assigned to AL. I'm going to add that information into CalTopo. If they're using the mobile app, they're in fact going to see that in real time as well. And now I have a clean record of all my assignments and which teams are out there covering them. And those teams have a unique number that they use for the entire day out there. And that's what we've kind of been pushing. And I know some people find that double work in some ways and more information to track. But honestly, we went so far, we within a couple months of pushing back on Matt, we switched our whole workflow in Marin to this, and it's just super clean. It's really easy. It's clean. You just have to make sure someone stays on top of where teams are assigned. Just like you have to anyway, if you were just using numbers, you got to remember which teams have been sent out and so forth. So it's important for, at this point, the T-card folks either have a computer or they get updates from the ops guy directly. The comms guy either has a computer where they can see the same information, or you give them an updated piece of paper. So how does that look on the paper side? So here's my standardized assignment package. As I mentioned, might just go into an IAP. I've got my list of 104 summaries here that I'm going to put into the IAP. I've got for this search, a very simple search here. So I've got 3 maps that go in the pack, an overview, a kind of a zoom in, and another zoom in that covers the areas. And then we have this form, the 4-part form, which has evolved a little over time. And we've added a couple more fields on there that are kind of useful. Incident name, operational period, usual stuff. But here we can circle what kind of team actually went out on this assignment. We may have written it up as a type 1 search, or a type 2 search. Maybe we sent a type 1 team out or whatever. They're going to start on segment AA, and they are team 101. And the other info that we make sure we record now on each team going out: who's your best medical person, who's your team leader. Make sure people have thought about that. And the further you are from help, the more medical experience you kind of want to have on that remote team. Additionally, you can add things like reassignments. After they finished AA, they got assigned AK. They took the inReach unit with this serial number out, so we can track them on the map too. So that kind of stuff. Any questions so far on this? I know I'm covering a lot of stuff tonight, but it's a bit of a greatest hits, but I wanted to kind of work through a lot of the workflow that we've been using and kind of trying to standardize on anyway to some extent. So that's how we do it. It's worked pretty well.
Rich, this is Betty Wong.
Hi.
How did you get the team numbers onto the search area on your?
So in
Welcome,
SART,
that
let me
one.
switch over to SART.
How did you input the team numbers?
Okay, I'll stand by one. I will go back to the map here. Let me find the map we were doing. There we go. Okay, so so now I have someone in the command post, an ops person or a plans person. Plans person is responsible for managing the map. But so let me go back and new share this. So I'm sitting in the command post here, and the ops deputy chief just came over and he said, I've just assigned team 101 to segment AA. They're going out now. So I hit the little edit button right here, and you can see I have a field for a team number and for a letter assignment. So I'm like, oh, 101's been sent out there. Okay, great. So now it shows up on the map. If I find segment AA, wherever that is here, it'll somewhere down there's AA, and it'll have the team number next to it. Where is it? There it is up here. So AA now has the team number displayed next to it. Anyone looking at the map can see who's been assigned to what segment. And then secondly, they now finished segment AA, and ops comes over and says, hey, I just reassigned those guys over to segment AK. So I go in here and like 101 is handling that now. And so I've got that covered. At the end of the day, when I'm downloading their tracks, I record their team number, not their segment. And then I can kind of go back and see when I look at tracks, where should they have gone versus where they actually went. So that works pretty well. Does that make sense? Is that okay? Okay. All right, I'm going to switch back. Stand by.
Yes, got that.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now, hang on, I've got my desktop all cluttered here. So anyway, so that works great. But like any search, tracking where teams are and who's been assigned is really important. So one of my must-haves, especially if I'm remote plans, like I talked about, where I'm sitting at home, I wrote all the plans and teams are getting deployed. I make sure I have a really dialed person or even a junior person who just knows the system. And like your job is watch everybody who's getting briefed and going out and make sure that operations chief or whoever's doing the briefing is telling you exactly, who's going out to what segment, and you get a good record of it. It works really well for us. We've been super happy overall with this approach, even though I fought it tooth and nail in the beginning. Matt was right. So anyway, there we go. And then of course, if you're packaging up a bunch of stuff, you might prepare a bunch of big briefing maps and stuff like that. But then your whole thing is done. You finish the IAP, which we do have nice automated tools for building IAPs. And in our long classes, we do spend some time building fancy IAPs and things using those tools, which I think I've made available to pretty much everyone out there. So there we go. That's kind of the approach and the mechanics that we use to build assignments within the system and get them packaged up now. I want to kind of shift gears here. Do you guys want to take like a 2-minute break or something? Just to, and then we'll do maybe another 20, 30 minutes, if that's okay.
If you need a break, Rich, take a break.
Yeah.
I need a 2-minute break. How's that? I'll be right back. And if you have any questions in the meantime, I'll be ready to answer them when I get right back. Thank you. All right. Any questions at the moment, or should we keep going? Oh, there is a question. Drone data. Yeah, we do put drone data in normally, and I'll segregate that. When I talk about managing large data sets, that's something that I always do is I carve out folders to put drone data in because it otherwise clutters up your ground search data. Parcel data was very useful. Yep. Yeah, I love the parcel layer. It's very handy. Okay, so with that, I'm going to hop back in here because I know everyone's time is valuable. So let's go back. And this is something in our bigger classes that we spend a lot of time on, and that's managing large incidents. By large incidents, I mean mutual aid incidents that go, 5 or more operational periods. And as by definition, have multiple people working on them with different perspectives and things, which is one of the reasons why we're trying to get, kind of one way of doing things, or at least people speaking the same language. So one of the things that happens on these large incidents, and the Alameda one's a great example where, we had, I think 6 or 7 or 8, plus all the civilian data that came in on that. That was a huge amount of data to manage. And we had to do some special tricks because there was so much data to manage there. But I kind of want to talk about how we manage large incidents. This came out of the campfire originally, where Matt and I were running the first few days of that with Mike St. John and a couple others. Some of you guys were there as well. But we were putting out 500-600 searchers a day, biggest searches ever, I think. And we learned a lot about how to deploy hundreds of people at once without getting too bogged down. And as some of you may remember, we got a little bogged down on the first day or so. So we learned some things there. So I want to talk about deployment very briefly here, just a couple of highlight slides. Then I want to talk about how we work with tracks and how we manage these large data sets kind of hopefully efficiently. So this is what we call the crush in our multi-day class. We actually do a deployment exercise because we all go to searches where even if the plans are written, people are standing around a really long time waiting to get put out. And sometimes it's one person trying to put 200 people in the field, and other times it's just we can't get the paperwork packaged right. We can't, it's just too much chaos, fog of war, that kind of stuff. Campfire was a great example. Like the first and second day, we were exhausted and we had hundreds of people there, and we were frantically trying to figure out how all these different agencies were supposed to work with one another and get people out in the field. So it was hard, and we spent a lot of time thinking about how you do that efficiently. So I just kind of wanted to touch on some of the highlights of what we've kind of come up with. And that is when you're signing in at a mutual aid search, you want everyone to sign in with their T cards, obviously, and their agency forms and their typing. And one of the most critical things we found is to identify, if I'm the host or if I'm the ops chief or the plans chief, you want to really identify agency reps as they come in and let them know that you're a key guy or girl, or lady. We want to make sure that you understand that we need you and we need you to help us build teams because they know more about their people than we do. And one of the mistakes we made at the campfire was we've always emphasized trying to build rainbow teams, cross different teams together. You get different skills and experience. Well, it turns out that's a disaster at a large search sometimes, because guess what? Each team comes in their own vehicles, they're self-deploying in their vehicles, and you start splitting up teams, who gets the vehicles? It becomes a second order of confusion that completely blew us up on the first day of the campfire. So we learned quickly that we want to keep teams together as much as possible, even though it was kind of counterintuitive to some of the things we wanted to achieve. So we get the agency team reps to get together and say, look, we want you to put together a whole bunch of 4-person teams. Be honest with us in the typing, because we can't verify it. Are your type 1 people really type 1? Are they type 2? Are they type 3? Be honest with us, because we're going to use that to deploy people. So meanwhile, the general briefing's going on a big search. You probably have 4 or 5 other people in the back, plans and ops assistants. You get anyone, all hands on deck, who has familiarization with what's been going on in terms of the planning process. And you start building those teams and you match them to assignments along with those agency reps. So you're doing this while the plans chief and the ops chief and the search manager and the IC are all out there giving their 15-minute general briefing. So everybody, I use the old ICS rule here, 1 briefer to 4 to 5 teams maximum. And that saves a lot of problems. Just remember that, because that's one of the biggest issues we see is one operations chief trying to put 20 teams in the field. Those last teams are going to be 2 hours delayed, So make sure you find enough people so that you have 1 briefer to 4 or 5 teams. And you might have to recruit some people that aren't super familiar, but you're going to say like, okay, here's your 5 assignments, and here's what I want you to do with each one of them. Here are the key points. Go deploy them. So as soon as that big briefing breaks up, the ops chief comes along. He's going to he or she is now going to supervise the deployment and deputize all of these people, both ops and plans folks, and whoever else you've conscripted, and maybe the agency reps too. And you're going to fan out and hopefully get everyone briefed very quickly. You'll get the 104 short forms out, filled in, make sure they get the map packs and all that stuff, and you're good to go. And so we try very hard to do that. So we're not doing things sequentially. We're trying to do them simultaneously, and we're trying to lever the overhead to make sure you don't overload a small number of people with a large number of teams to brief. So If this goes well, you should have everybody out in 30 minutes or so. If it doesn't go well, we've seen it can go an hour or 2 hours sometimes to get everybody out. So anyway, this is just one way of doing it, but it seems to work pretty well. Another variation of that, when you have a really big search, we'll often have divisions or groups. So if we have an 8 o'clock general briefing, let's say, we might say we want all the division supervisors and agency reps there at 6:30 or 7, and we're going to do an early briefing. And we're going to give those division supervisors or group supervisors their package of maps, their package of assignments for their area. And when the general briefing's over, they can go straight, gather their teams and head out. So it's one way to save time. Whereas if you do the briefing and you say, I want to meet with all the division group supervisors over here right now, now you're going to add another hour to the delay, because then they have to go out after you give them their paperwork and find their teams and start the deployment process. So holding that earlier makes a ton of sense. And they can also ask questions and things. And on a large operation, that's a big time saver. So Campfire, yet another good example of that. On days like 3, 4, 5, and 6, we tried to have all those division supervisors, group supervisors in early, gave them a rundown of what they're doing for the day, told them which teams they were going to have for the day and which areas they were going to get assignment wise. And then they were responsible for the tactics themselves on how they broke up their groups and into teams and how they deployed them. So it's not a perfect system, because there's never a perfect one when it's that big. But I did want to touch on this because it does kind of flow directly out of the paperwork flow from the IAP and so forth. So that's how we roll on that. So another thing we spend some time on typically, and this comes out in our exercise we do in person, team building considerations. And these are just a few things to think about. Make sure you match the skills to the assignments. You don't want to send a type 2 or 3 team out into a really gnarly type 1 environment. You want good flankers out there. I'm guilty of it too. Like sometimes I'll just say, hey, somebody's over here. Are you free? Can you be a flanker? That's not great. You really want people who've had some practice at it, understand it, comfortable working with handlers and doing a good job there. So we try to identify experienced flankers. You want strong team leaders. You want experience in a mutual aid environment. You want local knowledge that you can dovetail into the teams. The firefighter who's going to search whatever, or the LE guy that's lived here their whole lives. Put those into the team. Someone with good navigations and comm skill. And then the more remote you get, the better the medical skills. I think more important to have someone that's really self-sufficient and solid out there on the medical side. And then as I already talked about, county teams versus rainbow teams. I've completely turned about face on that. I try to keep teams together. They know how to work with one another. I blend teams when I kind of need to now, but it really simplifies logistics and the knowledge of, interpersonal relationships and things. It's just easier when you try to keep one county's team kind of intact, in individual team sizes. And then carefully evaluate team sizes. I think I mentioned this earlier. You kind of want the smallest teams possible, because that gives you the maximum amount of redeployment flexibility, more chess pieces to move as you need them throughout the day. So those are the kind of things I like to do anyway when I'm in that role. Okay, and then once again, here's the 104 deployment summary. I'm not sure what happened to the other one where the math wasn't adding up, but here's another great example where you can see how much you need. As I'm planning for tomorrow for operational period 3 or whatever, and I have to get my resource order into OES by 3 in the afternoon. As I'm going along, I can really start to figure out what my needs are going to be for tomorrow. So I encourage you to populate the team size and to kind of use that as a tracking tool within there. There's an example from the Campfire where we're setting up the divisions and all the counties that were going in each division and so forth. So I want to switch gears a little bit now in the little bit of time we have left and talk about managing large search data sets in SARTopo and CalTopo. So this is an Alpine Lake search from a few years ago. We had a missing woman that was never found. I'm sure many of you were on this search, but this one went like 8 or 9 operational periods, I think, in the end. And it had tons of data, and it started out on Terrain Navigator Pro actually for the first 2 days or 3 days. Then we switched it to SARTopo, and we had just this giant mismatch of data. And we had lots and lots of different counties working on it at different times with different styles. And we ended up with what looks common on a lot of our big searches still, which is a lot of data that's not super well organized because everyone's exhausted all the time and you're trying to keep up with what's going on today and plan for tomorrow. So what I want to try to do is say, this is, again, something that can be done remotely. You can have someone cleaning up data, cleaning up tracks remotely, organizing it better into folders. And so what I want to kind of show you is some of the things that we've come up with as sort of best practices for organizing data within SARTopo here. And we have a document on this, which I'm happy to email out. It's a PDF. I'm sure many of you have seen it, but that document came out of like a year of negotiation back in maybe 2017 and 18 or so. We got all the counties that we knew were using SARTopo pretty extensively at the time. We kind of got together and said, look, we need, again, a common language here to work with one another. How do we do this? And how do we organize data so that we can all read each other's search data in a nice, clean way? So we spent some time on that. And I want to kind of talk about folders first and foremost, because they are super useful. Folders are the tool you use to organize your data. So here's this search on the left-hand side, as it stood. One reason you see OP4 assignments here as its own folder is because those were Terrain Navigator Pro shapes from the earlier days that we threw in before we made actual assignments in SARTopo. But you can see here, we started building new operational periods. We have assignments. We had a clues folder. All the tracks from the search went into one folder here. And then markers were not too pretty, actually. So I'm going to show you those in a second. So what we'd like to see, and this is kind of outlined in that document, is that we break stuff into more granular forms, especially on a larger search, a longer search, where you can really look at the progression of what's been done on the search and, in sort of a sequential manner. And you can think about, is it time to go back and look here again? And those kinds of things, the kinds of questions you can't really answer easily if all your data is in a big flat file. So what we do is we like to organize tracks, first of all, into folders by operational period. And you can turn them on and off easily by turning their visibility on and off. And as I showed you earlier tonight, you can actually go in with this little pencil thing and you can say, don't show on load or whatever, so that, maybe you don't want to see the tracks from 6 days ago at all when you load the map. You just want to see the last couple of days that you're working on. So you can toggle those on and off too. In some cases here, so what I did is I took this data from this and I tried to reconstruct, based on some rough track names, what was really going on and which operational period which tracks were generated in. And I tried to sort those out. I also tried to take important markers and put them in one folder, ICP, so forth, gate, lock gate, things that might, PLS. And then I took clues that we think might be important and put them in an important clues folder instead of just a markers folder. And then we took minor clues that may or may not be important and put those into a minor clue folder. So it's all kind of obvious if you look at it, but it rarely gets done. And so that's something we try to imprint on people. And it's also something that can be done remotely by someone sitting at home with some time, not buried in the fog of war out there at the command post too. So a second thing we'll do is we'll really talk about using quality symbology. Over on the left, this is how we recorded the stuff originally. We all see track, with the date stamp on it. That means nothing. This means nothing. It doesn't tell me anything. When I'm looking at a map without labels, I don't know what red dots versus purple dots means at all. It doesn't mean anything to me. So I try to organize clues into clues and other things into other things. So in this case, important clues, I'll have a clue marker on them and they're in the important clue folder. If I'm really studying important clues, I can turn the minor clues off and just look at a map with the important clues on it, for instance. Down here, I've turned game cameras into little cameras. That's super handy because it's very obvious what the object on the map is then. And I don't have to have the labels turned on for it because I can see it's just a camera. And then down here, I've put important markers like the PLS and the ICP. ICP is not a red dot anymore. It's a proper ICP symbol and so forth. So likewise, color coding is another tool that's really important and isn't often utilized. When we download tracks, unless someone's staying on top of it, the tracks aren't necessarily being correlated to the color of the operational period. So you really want to color those to match the operational period. If OP6 is designated as a blue operational period with blue segments, then make sure the tracks that come in are blue. Same for operational period 8. It's green, make sure the tracks come in green, because that's going to give you a much better way of looking at the data there. I'm going to go to an example at the end here, but I want to talk about tracks coming in and the issues with tracks. So again, the best practice that at least I push on is keeping the track names as short as possible. You don't want any of this current track 31 July, blah, blah, blah stuff, because if you happen to display that on the map, it's going to be a foot wide on the map and you have 100 of those labels on there. All you're going to see on the map is an obliteration of labels, which fortunately you can turn off and on by folder, but still that's not useful. In fact, you don't even know what current track 31 July 16 means because there's no team number or anything. So what I do is make sure that the person downloading tracks coming in has a convention. What's your team number? And the first GPS is A, the second is B, third is C. Have a big stack of sticky notes when all the sweaty people come in from the search, try to throw GPSs on the table to go get a sandwich. You stop them and you say, like, whoa, what team number are you? Write your team number on here, put the sticker on your GPS, come back and pick it up a little bit. All the unscanned GPSs go on the left side of the table. The scanned ones go on the right side of the table. And then as you're importing, it's very easy to renumber these and relabel them. And you actually have, a reasonable history. On the mobile app, what we like to do is, in our own team anyways, we say like team 101 and your 2 initials. So for operational awareness, when I'm looking at that map in real time and seeing a marker go around and I see someone's initial RS, I'm like, oh, Rich Shelton's out there on team 101 because I know the initials of the people on my team. So that's another way to do it as well. But anyway, this is the time to do it. You got to catch them when they're coming in. And you also need someone good at cleaning up tracks in SARTopo. I actually do in our long classes about a half an hour segment on some of the tricks for cleaning up tracks to make that process a little bit easier. But having someone trained who's good at that, again, it can be a remote person sitting, 200 miles away at home cleaning up tracks for you because they have a nice quiet room with a big monitor and good connectivity, and they can bang through it really fast. So we'll tend to do that too. Another one of my big pushes is random colors when printing things. When I print maps, I always set the folder view for the assignments to random instead of by operational period. Operational period, it can be pretty hard in this field then to kind of see what the borders are between different assignments and so forth. If you do random colors, especially when you print them. Yep.
You can only do random colors, I think, for assignments that are in the assignments folder. If you've put a
correct.
Okay.
And in fact, I've had people ask. I had a call from Colorado this week actually because they're working on their best practices, and they like historically to put their assignments into new folders called assignment folders. When you do that, you can't do these nice display things. So for that reason, I always leave my assignments while I'm using them in the assignments folder so I can do random colors. And that's exactly your point, Dave. That's a really good point. So at least for the printing part, I leave all the assignments in the assignments folder. After a day or two, especially on a big search, when you've got 300 assignments in that folder, then I might start moving them out to prior OP assignment folders or something like that. But then I'm not really printing them anymore at that point. So, but very good point. Other best practices here, create folders of identified landing zones. Some counties, in fact, I had a call this week on that too, where one county is wanting to make a transparent overlay of all the LZs they've identified in their county. They can pop it up in SARTopo, then they can go in and put markers for a specific search with their pre-designated LZ names on it, and then they can remove the transparent layer. So that's a really good thing. We also like to use division or group folders if we have a big geographically dispersed thing, or even if you have like air assignments, those would go into a separate folder. And then a water group, we often work with Coast Guard or County Fire on jet skis and so forth. So we'll split that information up, and those tracks and those assignments often into separate division folders too. And as Dave just talked about, I talked about the prior assignments folders. When something gets stale and old and you've got 300 assignments in your main assignment folder, you can move them to a prior assignments folder or an OP3 assignment folder or whatever to declutter the map. And then we really push to use standard ICS icons with a couple of extra SAR customizations, but you'll find all of those in there. They all have hover over hotspots, so they're pretty nice to use and easy to use. Furthermore, a couple of the custom ones we've made, like important markers for PLS, LKP, find of the person, so forth. We've kind of been pushing just using the big X in there because that's easy to if everyone uses the same one, when you open a map, it's easy to spot those important locations as well. So that's all good stuff. And then when the search is over, obviously you want to archive your data because your map might get deleted. We'll usually create some final map perspectives that we'll give to law enforcement and stuff. I'll usually make a big Dropbox folder that has various renderings of maps, 3D maps, all kinds of different stuff, coordinate tables, which you can print in SARTopo. I don't know how many of you have done that. I'll show you that in a second though. That's a very handy tool. Final PDF report, PDF report of the search, we do those in D4H, and all that gets Dropboxed or Google Doc'd over to LE or the IC or the host county or whatever. So with that, I want to jump over into what that looks like on this particular map, how the before and after kind of looks. And it's kind of hard, you know, to portray this way, but hopefully it'll make some sense here. So let me switch back to the other map. There we go. And we're back on the big map now. I'm going to switch to this actual search map now. Oh, before I do that, when I was talking about packaging up and putting all the assignments and stuff in the IAP, here's an example of that. I just wanted to run through it. This is using our IAP Builder app that we have, which is available to anyone who wants it. And it works in Google Docs. I think a lot of you have probably used it before, but you can build your IAP in here quite nicely. And then we just kind of merge our 104 summaries in here with our assignment information. And then after that, we go down and put in, you know, the comms forums and all that, which are nice pull down menus and things, our medical plan, our field emergency information. We work our way through. And then at the end, tide tables in this case, because we're working along the ocean, weather forecast, and then we have our map pack put in at the end for that day's assignments, and then a missing person poster. So in this particular case, there wouldn't be a traditional, you know, team assignment pack. We're just giving you a fat IAP to the team leader, and like everything about the search is in here, all the comp stuff in here, all the emergency procedures are in here. You know, if your dog needs canine help, the vet's in here. You know, we're trying to make sure everybody has as much awareness of what's going on as possible. All the assignments are in here too, which of course may change over the day, but at least as of the start of the day, they have all the information. So now jumping over, here is the before of that same search that I was talking about, where we had many, many counties, including ourselves. And I think, yeah, Cocoa was there, and, you know, Alpine, Placer, lots of counties were there. And we all were working on this interactively, different days and things. So you can see there's a lot of stuff here that's that could be better, which I kind of based those examples on. First of all, over here, as I mentioned, you know, we're not using real standardized stuff here. We did clean this up a little bit, but, you know, game cameras are purple dots and clues are red dots, but, you know, some other things are red dots too, like start of a track, you know. So, and then you look through here, you can, I don't know how easy it is to see, but you can see almost every line has a different color. So there's no association between track colors and operational periods. And in fact, all the tracks for the whole search, none of them are, or very few of them are named, and they're all dumped into one big folder, right? So I don't really know who did what when, unless there's a lucky little note in here. Some sheriff too, I don't know what that means. You know, what's sheriff's second day, or I don't know. So there's a lot of stuff here. Oh, and we're up to where we have some team numbers. So that's good. I can figure part of this out here. But again, when I move over to the map, as I mentioned earlier, having those long track names are a mess, right? So the first thing I would do, if I was still working with this data, I'd go down to the bottom of my track folder and I turn labels off for that. So now I can exhale. I can still see all the tracks, but I'm struggling to kind of see what's going on here because all these tracks are not really associated with anything in particular. And I don't know when they were recorded and stuff. And I see dots on here. I don't know if they're clues. Oh, there's a clue. Is that an important clue? I don't know. That kind of stuff. So it's a pretty tough thing to work with. I could go in and, if I'm a planner trying to get caught up, I could turn all the tracks off and just try to get a snapshot of what's going on here. I can say, in this case, both operational periods had the same color too. That was a difficult thing. So there's a lot of stuff with visibility that's difficult here. So with the hindsight, I went through and kind of reprocessed that whole data set and said, like, how can we make that look better? So let me kind of turn everything on to start with here. And what I've done initially is I took my best shot at figuring out which tracks were recorded in which operational period. That took a long time, actually. I haven't cleaned up all the tracks completely, but I got them fairly cleaned up. So now I know, like, the green ones are operational period 8, and the green assignments are operational period 8, and operational period 6 is kind of amber here, and 4 is blue and stuff. So that's good. I can start to see that now. I can immediately see there's an important marker because it's got an X. Oh, that's the PLS. That's good. Okay. I can see the ICP because it has an ICP marker. My data is a little better organized. But now if I'm starting to think about what are we doing today, I can get a clear picture. I can turn off prior operational period tracks. I can just leave today's on. I can go down to operational periods here, turn off operational period 6. And if I'm lucky, all I'm going to see are important clues, today's assignments, which I can still randomize in here. If I go down to the bottom, I can still randomize the color if I want. Display setting random. Okay, so now I can kind of see the borders of the assignments a little better. And I can actually see where all of my teams are today out in the field and which areas I've assigned that aren't getting covered, like this one here and so forth. I can see that in, kind of real time. Similarly, if I want to see, like, well, how much of yesterday's assignments did we really get done? Let's take a look at that. So I can go down here now. I can turn off today's operational period, turn on yesterday's. I can turn off today's tracks, turn on yesterday's tracks. And now I have a good view of what was going on in operational period 6. It's not perfect because I still have a lot of, like, track cleanup to do here and stuff. But my data is organized where I can toggle things on and off in a nice way. And I can also toggle off, things like track names and so forth here. So I don't see a bunch of noise from that sort of thing. If I want to go in and find out what team did this, I can just go in and highlight and click on it. And that was team 627. I can look up the debrief and see what happened, for instance. Team 6, assignment 632 didn't get done, that kind of thing. So in the end, and if I'm doing a briefing, with LE or whatever, I can say, here's where we are on clues. Here's the ones we think carry some weight. Some, we need to discuss each one of these. Here's some stuff that came up empty or we've kind of discounted, and here's the important markers. So, it takes a while to get all that sort of stuff done, but it's really worth your time to kind of keep that, cleaned up as you go along in a search, and to utilize remote resources if you have those, to say, like, hey, can you clean up all these track names for me? Can you make all the colors uniform? Can you clean up the tracks themselves so I don't have long straight lines all over the map? And, someone back in San Francisco can be doing that while you're up on top of Mount Whitney or something, trying to run a search, So anyway, the way we do this has changed a lot over the years, and the flexibility we have in managing it. And there's no reason you can't call another team in. Like, on some of the fires, we were doing a lot of this kind of work remotely, including rendering giant 48 by 60 something maps for USAR teams to go out and check structures with. We were generating them all here. I stood in my house here, putting them in a Dropbox folder, and they were printing them up at the search. So remote resources are a great thing, and there are a lot of people around now who are pretty comfortable doing this kind of work remotely, and can really lever up your on the ground team who has crummy internet and tiny screens and a lot of confusion and noise and people bothering you and stuff like that. So I recommend maximizing leverage on remote searches. So with that, that's my 2 hours. I tried to kind of throw some greatest hits in here and things that I thought might be of interest or not super familiar with to everyone. Any comments, questions, things like that?
Rich?
Yep.
Question. How do you handle a team that's debriefed in the field for that information to get back to the remote planners?
The debrief info?
Yes.
Yeah, so that is a very good problem. I mean, so one of the things I always ask the division supervisor or group supervisor is to make sure someone qualified is going through those. One of the mistakes we've made in the past is not putting enough importance on both the debrief process itself, who's doing it, and who is flagging stuff that looks like it needs to be followed up on. So I think over the years, I've gotten a lot more careful about making sure I have someone who's really experienced doing the debriefs and making sure they know, hey, if you see anything in there that seems weird, like this area, I think we heard a noise down there, but we couldn't get there. We should really check that out. Make sure that information gets back quickly. So in a division situation, that information should go right back to the division supervisor and it should be addressed. But that debriefer needs to make sure it gets back to the main command post too, so it gets folded into the next day's planning cycle as well.
Great, thank you.
That's a tricky one though. Divisions can be messy sometimes, especially if comms are bad.
You don't normally get all the debriefing forms coming back. You're relying on other folks to identify the.
Yeah, I mean, you get them eventually, but it usually takes a while.
Hey, Rich, kind of like similar question actually, because we faced this on the Christchurch search, was how to either animate areas that weren't searched or somehow get that into the tool either on the assignment or as another object to roll into the next operational period. Do you have best practices around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've tended to do, I mean, we used to, originally Matt envisioned this workflow where you uploaded the tracks onto the person's assignment, and you could actually see what their tracks were versus their exact assignment and stuff. We kind of went away from that. It was just too clunky. And I think what we really do is I like to go in that example I just showed you and say like, okay, let's look at yesterday and the day before. We have all the data in finally. People have emailed their tracks, we've downloaded them, whatever SARTopo or CalTopo mobile app. So we've got all that data. Let's look at what we had envisioned for yesterday and hope to accomplish. And let's see what we really got done. And let's see where the holes are based on tracks alone. And, and we've also gotten far away from trying to record PODs accurately. They're always wrong, right? People, I mean, it's just human nature. You don't really know how to record it, but you do know how to record your tracks, and those are real data. So I really rely heavily on looking at the track data, looking at the holes in the track data and suspicious areas in the track data from the day before and the day before that, and say like, look, I know we've moved on to this other geographic area now, let's say, and we've only limited resources in these earlier ones, but I really don't like these 5 or 6 areas that weren't covered very well. We should go back today and hit those. And I think, Brian, one of those meetings we had on that search where we kind of said like, okay, this is it. Where are the holes? What do we all think the holes are that we missed? And where should we kind of try to put some resources in there? It's never perfect, but I think it's kind of the way to approach it,
Yeah. And then a follow-up question is, have you ever thought of or trying to have the debriefers actually have a laptop with them so you can do it in SARTopo kind of real time and maybe annotate the map?
Yeah. So not to let a secret out or anything, but one of the things Matt has been thinking very hard about is kind of a concept of modules or something, for lack of a better word, but adding some modular functions into CalTopo where you could have things like debriefing modules and stuff like that. And they could be map objects and maybe photos and things too. And all those could be associated with, say, an assignment or a segment or something like that. And they could appear on the map and be toggled on and off. It's a little bit in the future, but That's definitely something that's been thought about. Another variation of that is, and I used to be opposed to this, but now I kind of like it, is let's go way out in, in left field and say we had a paging system built into SARTopo, and you're running in-county searches, and you've got 25 people who said they're responding to the search, and it's all inside SARTopo already. It'd be great to have a little pull-down box where I could just start assigning those people as resources to teams while they're driving, and when they show up, I can get teams ready to go. So there's ways where you could take this further, assuming you have connectivity and stuff. But I think debriefing is one of the areas that's been talked about in that regard, and I think what you say has a lot of merit. I think in certain cases, tracking resources like team members through a paging system or something where there's one entry is kind of cool too. So there may be things like that that come down the road, and I know the CalTopo folks are thinking about that a lot and seeing what would make sense and what's possible, and whether there might even be an architecture where you could build something like that yourself with one of these modules, even if no one else wanted it. Pictures is another example. Being able to, take evidence photos and put them on the map would be great. That kind of stuff is definitely in the medium and long-term plan, I think,
Yeah. Okay. No, that's great. Thank you. And then one other different topic. When you're looking at assignments that are in progress or prepared,
Yep.
their colors are very similar. Is there a way of changing?
We would have to get Matt to do that, but I would totally agree with that. It's like the blue and purple, I think. Is that right?
Yeah.
It's not great. Yeah.
Right. And some, I don't want to say that all our search managers are older, but some of our older folk, color becomes a problem, right?
I'm no spring chicken. Yeah, so I agree with that. And for those that haven't used that, I thought it was kind of a not very useful thing, but essentially inside your display options, you can display by status, and each assignment or segment can be placed in status, either draft, in progress, assigned, in progress, completed, and so forth. And actually, I quickly found that to be really useful, and it's great. Like in some of the fire searches where we had teams out all over, and we had a lot of politicians and senior people from the towns and stuff coming around. You could say, okay, let's show you which areas the search is complete in, which areas are in progress now, which ones we haven't yet started, and it's just one click on the map. But again, you need someone fairly diligent to stay on top of that process and update all of the segments as they get started and completed. But we try to do that along with that person. Could be the same person who's putting the team numbers into the system. And I think it's a super useful tool in many searches. And at the end of the day, you can say like, okay, let's look at our plan for today's OP. How many of them got done? How many of them got partially completed? How many didn't get started? Should those be at the top of the list for tomorrow? Or, how do we look at that?
Great, thank you.
Hey, I got a quick question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Have you guys looked into doing some sort of APRS integration?
I think you can do APRS already. However, no one really. So what we found is the CalTopo mobile app kind of usurps that a little bit. And then what you can also do. Let me just switch over to the map for a sec. Where's my map thing? Hang on a second. Got too many tabs open here. So if I go back to the map and share it, 1 second. Okay, so down here, this is another thing that you may not know about in the same category. So let me go down here. Let me go to a more empty, my test map, so it's a little cleaner. So I can hit add now. And down here, you're going to see a category called locators, right? So here's APRS live tracking, as you just requested. So you can say call sign, label, live tracks, and so forth. I haven't set this up before, but it definitely works. Another category of locator, which we use all the time, are in-reach units. So if you have in-reach units, this is called Garmin, well, it's now called Garmin InReach here. You'll have a team. If you have Garmin InReach units on an enterprise account, we have one called Marin SAR, one word, and we put a lot of our personal devices on a team account, enterprise account. And so I can go in here now and just add my connect key, which is Marin SAR, and then I can label it, SAR InReaches, hit save, and they will all start populating on the map when they are activated. The next one that is also very useful is fleet. So if I go add, where'd it go? Locator again. I can track a specific aircraft if I want. I can also go fleet here, and this is where you would put National Guard nanos. And the code there would be FFT for Friendly Force Tracker. So if I put in FFT on here and hit save, all the National Guard nanos that are interfaced with the SARTopo servers will start appearing on here. And we use those a lot, obviously, in mutual aid environments. They've been great about showing up with boxfuls of those when we need them. The next one, which you may not know about, which is pretty cool, is SMS locator. I like to do this in my classes, but I can say, here's the missing person. Here's their phone number, right? 415, blah, 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 555, 1212 or whatever. And then I can say, open this link to send us your location and follow directions. And so this will send a text to the MP's phone number. And then if they click on that text and follow the link, their location will appear immediately on the SARTopo map. So that's been there like 6 months or so, but it's another pretty cool feature. It doesn't, it may not work all that often, but it may. If you can get the text through the person and they can click and allow the browser to give it their location for a kind of a Luddite missing person or something, that could be pretty useful. So all of those things are available for tracking live resources in the field, in addition to the CalTopo mobile app, which is kind of the gold standard now. There's one other one that I should mention, which is Fleet Sync radios from Kenwood. Several counties, Nevada, Placer, Marin, actually on our high bands, we have those Fleet Sync radios that, so essentially if you set up an offline instance of CalTopo and you plug in one of your radios to, through a serial cable into your computer, then all of the comms that go in and out of that radio to all the radios in the field will ping those radios for GPS location and plot those in real time on the maps as well. So even in areas where you have no cell coverage and you're up in some super alpine Nevada County place or out, their repeater system will kick in for you and feed all of their radio locations back to the map, which is pretty sweet, actually. Okay, other questions, comments?
Rich, where would we get the, you mentioned the IAP Builder app? How would we go about it?
I can give that to you. So it's a Google Doc. It's pretty easy. There's basically a read-only master that I keep ownership of, and then it's a permanent link, and you can always click on that link and then do file, make a copy in your own Google account, and you can start cranking it out from there. And there's some instructions. If you send me an email, so anyone who's interested in that, who doesn't have it, send me an email at richards@marinsar.org. I think it's actually on the invitation maybe for the meeting, but I'll just show you what it is really quick here. And if people are bored, they can feel free to drop off or whatever, but I'll just show you real quickly what that is. Okay, let's see. Okay, share. All right, I'm back on this one. So I'm going to go to IAP Builder just to show you what it looks like. Oops, what happened there? Okay, so what I will send you is a PDF that looks like this, and you essentially click on this and it opens up a read-only version of the IAP Builder. And then I say file, make a copy. So I have one that I can write on, and I'll say new search. and I'll save it to my Google account. And now I have a new blank. And so just to show you, a couple of the highlights of how it works, as soon as it saves to my new account. What is going on? There we go. Okay, so it has a lot of cool features like automatic logos and stuff. So, if we're doing a search in, Contra Costa, I just use the pull down tab for Contra Costa, and it's a mutual aid search. So Cal OES is the other party. And you just fill in all this information once. The way this started was back like almost 10 years ago when I was the grunt IAP builder. And they would say, like, here's the Word file from our last search, start with that. And it was just this mangled Word document full of horrible formatting. And you had to basically type in every single letter all the way through it. So I'm like, there's got to be a better way. This isn't like rocket science here, but I tried to put some nice functionality in here that makes it easy and fast to build an IAP. So in here, you just kind of put in, what are the dates, who's the IC, who's the chief, who are the agency reps. On the cover page, it will, I'm not sure why that didn't render, but it will eventually. Let me see if that works. There it goes. I'm not sure why I didn't render the first time. You can put a photo right inside here. So you get a nice cover page. Then you do incident objectives. This stuff is auto-populated from that first page where you input info. Then you can use 204 forms if you have water groups and stuff. But this is when, after I render the PDF, I'll take the PDF out of SARTopo with the assignment summary, and I'll just merge it into this document once it's printed as a PDF. 205 is the comms plan. Again, I've got it all set up with cool pull down boxes, so you can just use pull downs. And I actually have most of the base SART proprietary channels in here, like Alco, Green, and stuff like that. If you go down here, I have the whole statewide template. I have the MREN stuff. I have all the fire junk, all kinds of LNU, all the different Coast Guard stuff here, like Solano, San Mateo, Alco, Coco, TAC4. So all those are in there. If I pull one of those down, it'll populate the tones and the frequencies automatically. So it's kind of a time saver there. You get to the medical plan, you do have to do a little work here because you have to you can do one for your own county. That's kind of your primary hospitals and things like that. But there's some pull downs here as well. But this is one of the things I always emphasize, but here's a little cheat sheet for managing the incident within the incident. And we highlight it in pink because of that. I always mention this during a briefing because I want people to know that if there's an emergency, they don't just panic. They have a little set of instructions here that will help them get through the emergency and collect the important information and get it back to the ICP. So that's what that's for. Little things we learned the hard way, like you want to make sure you have a vet. Like what happens when we had a dog get hit by a car, and we were smart enough to put a vet in here, but we didn't check that they were closed on Saturday. So, think it kind of forces you to think through things and make sure you've thought about all the things that can go wrong. And I don't know about you guys, but like if I go to a search and I ask kind of like, well, what happens if someone gets hurt? And they're like, yeah, I guess we can call an ambulance. Like that's not real comforting, especially if you're in a backcountry situation. I want to make sure someone's thought about it before we send a lot of people out in harm's way there. So this is one way of doing that. It forces you to think about that. This gets auto-generated. It's an org chart for the day, hazards and risks. This is the COCO chart that we just swiped and stuck in here basically, but you can yes, no, all sorts of different, bad things in the environment out there. And then finally, towards the end, we'll go ahead and add things like tide tables, map packages, stuff like that. When you're all done, you say file print. It's actually pretty easy. I say I want to print to a PDF instead of a printer. I go into portrait mode. I want to print the workbook. I can go in here and select, I don't want to print the instructions. I just want to print some of the pages here. And then I hit apply. And then I go down here and I want to fit the pages to length, to the height, so they all fit, normal spaces, stuff like that, formatting. I don't want grid lines because it's a spreadsheet basically. And then I go back and then I render that into a PDF. And essentially that thing will print my whole IAP out. Once I print it to a PDF, I use either a Mac or Adobe Acrobat. I grab those other PDFs that I printed out of SARTopo and I just blend all the pages together. My package is all done. I email that out to all my responders. And if I have mutual aid people coming tomorrow, or I wrote the plan for a mutual aid search for tomorrow morning, right about this time of night tonight, I'd be finishing up my plan and I'd email it to everybody coming. So they would have the map packages, the plan. If they have questions in the morning, they've got all the information ahead of time. They'll know where to download offline maps for, let's say, and stuff like that. So anyway, it's a pretty good tool. It saves a lot of time. It's not, it's got a lot of shortcuts in it and time savers, but it's, it's not rocket science, but it does save you a lot of time. So that's that. We also have a missing person flyer builder that does the same thing and works the same way. A lot of times we don't have access to the LE person to build a poster or whatever. It's the middle of the night. So we'll just use that to quickly put a missing poster together to get out on social media. So I'm happy to give that information out to everybody who wants it. You can use it or choose not to.
Will you have all your slides available for?
Yes, I'm happy. What I can do is actually make a Dropbox. I'll put the IAP builder link, the missing person flyer builder in there on best practices doc, the slides from tonight. I'll put it in a folder and then I can send that to anybody that sends me their email address who's interested.
And maybe the recording.
And the recording, yeah. So I did record this. In fact, I'm going to stop the recording part now, just for make sure I don't forget. Stop share here. Uh-oh. Stop recording. Stop cloud recording.